Welcome back, everyone. I'm so happy that you're here. And today is a really special day because we are speaking to one of my incredible mentors and friends and the source of so much inspiration for me. I'm talking about Raheel Raza, who is here. And Raheel and I worked on Honor Diaries together many years ago. And I always laugh because we had done a tour with Honor Diaries. And um, it was the end of the tour, and I sort of was talking to her with tears in my eyes, and I said, "Well, Raheel, that was just so wonderful, and I hope I see you again." And do you remember what happened?
I
Do you
do.
remember this moment?
Yes, I do. I do. I do. Well, they say you should wish for something and expect it to happen. You didn't think that we'd still be connected, what, 10 years down the road?
It's amazing. I mean, it was so great. You looked at me and with a twinkle in your eye and you said, "Oh, don't worry, we're just getting started." So here we are, all these years later. It's such a joy. I'm gonna just read your bio so that people know a little bit more about you, and then we'll dive right in.
Sure.
So Raheel Raza is the president of the Council for Muslims Facing Tomorrow, the founding member of the Muslim Reform Movement, the director of the Forum for Learning. Plus, she's an award winning journalist, author, public speaker, advocate for human rights. And she also advocates for gender equality and dignity and diversity. But those are just a couple of sentences about her. There's so much more to unpack. And we'll dive right in. So,
Okay.
thank you for being here
Well,
today.
thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Okay, well let's really cut to the core. So the name of this summit is about the Empowered Women Summit, and the tagline of the summit is how to find your power, use your voice, and change the world. And that's why I wanted you to come on because you really embody all of this. But I want to get really right to it and say, Raheel, how is it that women who are living in closed societies or have cultures or religions that actually forbid them from using their voice, how can they access this? So it's the question of the time that I want to speak together. Feel free to take that apart in any direction you want, but that's really what I want to get at with you.
Well, my personal journey is actually epitomizes exactly what you've spoken about. I was born in Pakistan. I grew up in a culture where women were supposed to be seen and not heard, and I was told told all the time that you talk too much, and I was a bit of a rebel since childhood. I still am, and so I lived through that you don't express your opinions, especially if you have a critique and you don't express your opinions about religious matters at all. This is how it is, this is how it's given to you, and we were supposed to accept that. So empowering myself was the first thing. Before I could even set out to empower other women, it had to be a question of, what do I believe? And fortunately for me, I was able to break away from that culture, which wasn't without its own challenges. Having a love marriage with a man who was from another sect of Islam, 45 years ago was huge. It was a huge scandal for me to choose the man that I wanted to marry. That itself was the beginning sort of empowerment to say that I can do this and I'm allowed to do it and I have every right to do it, both religiously and socially. And then leaving and coming to the West, where there is that freedom to be able to speak out. There is gender equality, and I embraced that. I embraced all of that, and I knew that what I've loved to do all my life, because I wasn't allowed to speak, I used to write. And so I'm going to use the power of the pen. I'm going to use my capacity as a writer to express myself, and not to just to express myself, but tell the stories of those who can't. And it started in very small ways. There was a stint in between Pakistan and Canada when we lived in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates for 7 years. And even though it was a sort of a restricted state, very much a totalitarian state, still is, I was able to write about the diverse women who lived there and who had really wonderful stories, and to do it in a way that was acceptable write stories of women who were empowered, who were bringing about change. And I think the key word in my entire journey has been change. How can we change ourselves for the better? And then how can we help other women change? And one thing I know at this wise old age is that we have to help each other. There has to be a helping hand. This empowerment, if I was to just empower myself, which I have, and then live my own life, that would be very selfish. So that empowerment needs to reach across boundaries in countries and geographical locations and become a power source for other women who still are living in those cultures. Muslim majority societies are not easy societies for women. These are patriarchal cultures. I grew up in it, so I know the double standards of, the men having all the freedoms, the women having few or none. Women have to struggle at every level to find their voice. And sometimes if they can't, they have to have people who support them. And that's what I set out to be, not just to empower myself and bring about change that I could through my writing and speaking, but to become a tool for those women, to become a voice for those women, so that that change can come. And you spoke about Honor Diaries. I mean, Honor Diaries is a perfect example of something that started off as your idea and then morphed into this award-winning documentary. But not only that, look at the changes that have come since then. There have been amazing changes even in Muslim majority societies. In countries where female genital mutilation was the norm, people are now rethinking it. There are laws coming into place. There is education about it. This was unheard of 10 years ago. We are talking about honor killings, the fact that there's so much more awareness of all these actions, forced and underage marriage. The three major issues that were addressed in Honor Diaries have not gone away. I mean, let's be realistic and factual, but there is much more awareness, and that awareness has come through the voices of the women in the documentary. That awareness has come through activism on the ground. But the fact is that not every woman can be an activist. There are social pressures, there are family pressures, there are societal pressures, economic pressures. So I don't expect every woman in a third world country to be an activist, but I can be an activist for them. Mm-hmm. I can be a voice for them. And I think that is important. And I am sometimes surprised to see that so-called feminist groups don't actually reach out to that level of support for women who are not part of the Western society, so to speak, or women who are not part of their culture. They're afraid to touch issues that are related to other cultures. Mm-hmm. But we can't be politically correct. If I want justice for myself, I must want the same justice for you.
I'm so glad you touched on that. That was definitely my follow-up question there, which is that I received a lot of pushback. You received a lot of pushback when we made Honor Diaries and when we made subsequent work together, because we are living in a society now where we really have to be almost gentle, or we're expected to be gentle when we call out different societal problems. And I'm so curious how you've responded to that, or what would you say even to a young woman in college who cares so much about issues, especially that are happening to women in the third world, in the developing world, in more closed societies? Well, how would you encourage her to use her voice in that way?
Oh, I would say don't let political correctness hold you back. You have to speak out. And I have always said that. You have to speak out. You may not be in a position maybe to take much action on it, but you have to at least speak out. And speak out or write about it. Use whatever talent you have. I'm not an artist, so if you ask me to draw, I would go berserk. But I can write. I could use, that's what my talent is, what my power is. So I tell young women, use whatever power you have. If you're an artist, you're a musician, you're, a creative director, you're an actor, singer. There are so many ways in which the message can be given. But give the message, speak out about it. And you are absolutely right. We are living in such difficult times. There is the cancel culture, there is political correctness. People are afraid of losing their positions if they speak out. But, that is obstructing justice. That is so unfair. It is so harsh because justice means that you have to speak out. In my organization, we have the three E's, which is to, empower people. But first, you have to expose the problem. If you're not going to expose the problem, we can't talk about it. So we have to expose the problem, educate the masses, and then empower for change from within. But the first part is the most difficult, the exposing of the problem. And we have to be able to find ways to do it. And it's not a soft and gentle diplomatic issue. And I'll give you a personal example that right after Honor Diaries was made, we started lobbying in Canada, where I live, to make female genital mutilation a criminal offense. And, we wanted this also put into the immigration manual that we will not accept barbaric practices. So there was a huge backlash against use of the term barbaric. And even our prime minister at that time said, that's a very harsh word and we shouldn't use it. So I said, okay, let me ask you a question. If this was your daughter, which part of cutting off a woman's genitals would you not call barbaric? It is barbaric. It's savage. It's inhuman. And I don't think we use these words enough for people to understand the enormity of the challenges women face. If women are being forced into underage marriage, that's child abuse. We have to call it that. Female genital mutilation is a barbaric, inhumane, cruel practice. We have to call it that. Honor killings are murders in the name of honor. You're taking a life in the name of honor, but they want to use wishy-washy language. They want to cover it up as domestic violence, which it is not. So I've also spent a lot of time in the last 10 years traveling to countries and asking their parliaments to separate the issue of domestic violence from honor killings, because honor killings are premeditated, as you know. We've done enough research on that. They're premeditated, they're planned, family members are involved, and they're done because of honor. So the education part of it, to empower women to understand that they don't always have to be the victims. They can take their lives in their hands with our help. What sort of support? It may not always be physical support, but sometimes you just need to talk to them. You just want to let them know that you are there. You want to give them the information that will empower them, the education that will empower them, the statistics that will empower them. And very often they turn around and say, oh my God, I didn't know. And this outreach, holding hands with our sisters in all parts of the world, whether it's Africa, whether it's Asia, whether it's America, we have to be able to do this without discriminating about, whether this is a Me Too movement or You Too movement. I mean, all that is wonderful, but it has to be all of us.
Right. I obviously I couldn't agree more. I want to get a little bit personal with you
Yes.
because I I love your story. I know your story. Not everyone listening knows your story, but to really speak about this idea of exposure and empowerment and education, what was it for you when you were a young woman or even a young girl? What happened to you that made you realize, I want to find my power, I want to find my voice? And the reason I'm asking you is because I'm hoping that people are watching and can be inspired and can have that same glimmer.
Well, as I told you, the culture was the same. It was a culture of honor. I mean, this doesn't mean that there was honor violence taking place, but it was, what are people going to say? So there was always this pressure on me as a young girl growing up in a family, although I had a very moderate educated family, but it was always about, oh, you can't do this because, girls and boys don't do these things, like you can't play cricket or you can't, talk openly. And my question was always why. And then I was told you asked too many questions. But I probed, and so my entire childhood, I fought against the patriarchy. And of course, that means I was always in trouble So when I was told that I couldn't play cricket because only boys played cricket, I decided to learn how to play cricket, and I played a damn good game of cricket. My father was a feminist, and that's something that really helped me. It's unfortunate that he died when I was very young, but he taught me riding, he taught me swimming, he taught me how to go bicycling. And I'm talking about, a time too many decades ago when all this was not the norm in a small city in Pakistan. I was the only one. If I wanted to wear trousers, that was something he said, okay. He basically said, you can be whatever you want, you can do whatever you want. And that stayed with me. Even when he died, I remembered him saying, you can do whatever you want, you can be whatever you want. But it isn't easy when you're surrounded by family and you're surrounded by this, idea that what I do is somehow going to impact the image of my family. And this is what happens to many young girls. Then their honor becomes the honor of the family, the honor of the village, the honor of the community, and whatever they do is so heavily scrutinized. But I found ways, and one of the ways was to read. I used to hide and read. I used to run away to the gardens and read. I used to go to libraries. So I read a lot, and I questioned, and I wrote. Whatever I could not express, I started documenting it. And that was very therapeutic and very helpful. But I had to fight for whatever rights I got, for an education in a college, and for saying that I want to work, and I want to have a job. I want to be economically not dependent on somebody else. That I don't want to get married at a young age. All of these were pressures from a very loving family, by the way. This is not done out of any mistreatment. It's considered to be the norm. This is what happens. Girls, educate them for a certain level limit, and then they get married and they have children, and that's their life. But I try and empower young women with the same ideas that I had, which may be in some cases too rebellious for their families, to say, you educate yourself, you get a job, you do whatever you want within your life, within the framework of what is, of course, acceptable. To you and to your family, in the sense that you don't have to run away, you don't have to be a rebel who's going to be in trouble. You can do it in so many different ways. We're living in the world where we're so fortunate. We've got the internet, we've got all the online tools at our hands, and that even in the smallest village in a third world country, there are these tools that people can use, but we need to be able to provide them. So this, for me, was a personal struggle, but there have always been angels along the way. There have always been mentors. There have always been people who have helped me, and then eventually I found and fell in love with and married a man who has been my biggest supporter and mentor and, my guide. And not every woman is as fortunate, but I am. And I have to give credit where it's due. My husband, my sons, even though they were not actively involved in my activism, always stood by me, always supported me. My sons have stood as bodyguards at the door when I was speaking about something really controversial. And, that has been a great, it's been like this comfort wall around me. We always have to have that place to go. But at the same time, there are people in my family who don't want to really look at what I'm doing. Maybe they find it too controversial, and that's okay. The work that I do, Paula, is not to please anyone. The work that I do, my activism, is one, embedded in my faith, and secondly, it comes from a place where I want to be able to sleep at night thinking that I've done one little bit to bring change to the world. And
Right.
I'm fortunate to live through a time where I'm seeing the change. When I look at the change coming into women's lives in Saudi Arabia, for example, slowly but surely. When I look at the change I see in Tunisia, Muslim women have got the right to marry non-Muslim men. Now that is huge, because Sharia, typical Sharia, does not allow that. So in Morocco, Muslim women, they lobbied and they got the right to have property and, equal rights in terms of divorce from the men, where it wasn't just that the man could say, I divorced you 3 times and it's done, it's a done thing, which in many Muslim countries is the norm. So those who are following strict Sharia law, and where women have been able to enlighten themselves, empower themselves, and see the light, where they see the difference about
Right,
laws that are discriminatory against women and those that support women. And
right.
so this is an ongoing journey.
I want to highlight one thing that you said, which was about keeping your mentors close. I mean,
Yes,
certainly that resonates with me, as we are talking so many years later. And I guess I want to encourage, as part of this conversation, anyone who is listening to find their tribe. And I
yes,
I feel like that's what you've taught me over the past several
very.
years.
Yes, it's very, very important to have mentors. To have, I had mentors and I couldn't have lived without them, and so I want to be a mentor to other young men, men and women both. We are
Right.
not excluding the men in this, because they have challenges as well. So it's important to have good mentors. It's important to keep them close. It's important to
Yeah.
keep the lines of communication open, and not let the mainstream media or social media dictate what it is that we want to say, or what we want to do. So if the doors close on us, as they have on me, and sometimes many times in mainstream media, find other avenues. There are always alternates. There
Right.
are always places where our voices can be heard. There are always people willing to lend a hand. And it's very easy for young people, especially in our communities, to fall into the wrong hands. So we must make sure they have an alternate, a place where they feel safe. So for years, before COVID, when now of course there's social distancing, we used to host through our organization what we call the safe space between the mosque and the mall, for young people to come and talk about whatever it is that they're concerned about, whatever it is that worries them, whatever questions they have. Not that we have all the answers, but at least we can listen and we can try and find solutions for them. And that is an ongoing thing. It still happens. If it's not happening physically, now it's happening on the phone and through the internet.
Right.
So to be able to be a source of comfort, a source of support for people from all walks of life, is a very important part of the work that I do.
Right. Is that you've been doing this work for decades, and it's tireless, the work that you're doing. So
It's
um,
tiring.
it's tiring, exactly. And that's what I wanted to ask you, is that certainly what we're trying to accomplish here, this idea of empowerment and really changing the world. I mean, it's really what we're about here, to make the shifts. What happens when you are tired? What happens, especially for the year that we've all had, when you just want to give up? I mean, what do you do? How do you stay motivated?
Well, this is where my spirituality comes in. So I soak in my spirituality. I do meditation. I do Tai Chi, and I have to tell you that all these things combined. I do a lot of yogic breathing, and there are times when the situation just brings you to tears. I mean, we are all human, and when you're giving all the time,
Yeah.
and of course, not to forget that there's immediate family, that the family pressures, and then of course whatever is happening on the outside, it gets exhausting, but it's also very rewarding. So that's the feedback, the input, the changes just inspire me. And I know that I can't stop. I mean, it's in my blood. I can't stop. The spirituality gives me a break, gives me a kick. So I do continuously attend spiritual sessions, and I meditate and I do a lot of breathing. And it has been very therapeutic. Laugh, important
Right.
to
You're
some.
connecting to something bigger than yourself.
Yes, yes. And that is important,
Oh,
because
I
we
was
have
just
to
saying
nourish.
connect to something greater than yourself. Yeah.
Yes, because we have to nourish the soul. And what I've learned in again in my wise old years is that unless we are nourished ourselves and unless we feel empowered, we can't really give. I can't give half of myself. I have to be full. And in order for me to be full, I have to be spiritually satisfied. And so, I nourish my soul. That's important. The body ages, and that's just a physical manifestation, but it is important. All my early years growing up, I never thought about looking after myself. But now I realize that in order to look after others, I need to look after myself. And I do. That's I mean, this last year has been tough, but in many ways very inspiring. Time to meditate, time to look inwards, time to take stock of my life, to see what have I done, what else do I want to do. And my to-do list, my bucket list is very long. So including
Good.
flying in a blimp. So I want to be able to do that.
I love it. Oh gosh, I love it. That's great. Well, that's a perfect way to end on your bucket list. I'm sure that people would love to learn more about your bucket list. And also, I just want to mention before we totally end today that Raheel is an incredible author of several books. If you could just give one or two sentences about your most recent book so that people can know about it.
Yes, so this was the birth child of COVID, so to speak. Because of being shut in, I was able to write a book that had been in my mind for a long time. It's called The ABCs of Islamism, and that is the website, www, the ABCs of Islamism. And it is a book which is really an ABCD. It's very simple reading. It identifies from A to Z all those issues that are part of political Islam and how that is different from the spiritual faith. So that people can clearly differentiate between the two and then look for the signs of Islamism and speak out against it. Again, it is a book in which I'm encouraging citizens of the country to speak out against inhuman practices of any kind, whether they come from religion or not. And it's on Amazon, so it's been very well received, and I'm working on that, to promote it right now.
Great. Well, we'll definitely have links and also hoping that we can give some of our viewers some copies of the book too.
I
So we'll
would be
add,
delighted to. That one, and also the one I wrote before this, which is the story of my spiritual journeys. So they are both on my website, and actually, people can choose which one they want, and I'd be happy to mail it out to them.
oh, that's
It's
great.
called
Okay.
Journeys of a Spiritual Activist, and that is the other side of the political work that I do.
Amazing. I feel like we just got started and I'm hoping that we have lots more opportunities to talk this year.
Yes.
Um, so thank you so much for being
Oh, it
here.
has been a pleasure just spending time with you. I miss that.